for joining us today to the Gender Budget Watchdog webinar Beyond Budget Lip Service, PEFA Pressure and Results. I thank everyone from across the Western Balkans and Moldova that logged in this afternoon, and we expect active participation. We offer translation
Само поддршка на зборови. Чувствувам як едно учество од вас и имаме
Bosnian and
од
Montenegrin language and Romanian
румански.
for our
Дидве
members
пропјесмани да
that come
регистриме
from
кај семинар.
Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina,
Ке
Macedonia,
ми пјесмарас
Serbia,
Македонија,
Montenegro,
Босна и Херцеговина,
and of course,
Малезија,
Moldova. And Kosovo. I didn't want to forget Kosovo, of course. My name is Maria Ristoska. I'm the Regional Director of the Gender Budget Watchdog Network, and together with the Austrian Development Agency and the Swedish International Development Agency and the International Budget Partnership that we are part of, we initiated this webinar to discuss gender-responsive budgeting in the public finance management framework. As you know, and especially in Western Balkans, GRB is increasingly present in strategies, action plans, and budgets. And whether it is done following procedures for gender analysis to inform budget decisions, execution and accountability is still a question. Therefore, we are revisiting the PEFA gender-responsive public finance management framework as a practical tool and as an accountability
руковоđenje
for integrating
kao jedno
gender-responsive
praktično
budgeting in
sredstvo
public
i
finance
sredstvo za
management
odgovornost u procesu rodno
The
odgovornog
Gender Budget
budžetiranja.
Network members are civil society organizations that with this webinar would like to also act as partners of
Responsabilitate
governments.
evenimentul răspunde, bineînțeles, la recentele discuții bazate pe PEFA, care
as a tool to enhance implementation of gender-responsive budgeting commitments. So in that respect, we are very much pleased that with us today, we have speakers that bring rather complementary perspectives. We have global methodology and practice perspective, legal and institutional analysis perspective, and civil society experience from country-level implementation and research. Our first speaker is Mona El-Chami, who is Senior Governance Specialist at the World Bank and a member of the PEFA Secretariat, where she supports methodology, guidance, training, and quality assurance for PEFA assessments worldwide. She brings deep experience in public financial management, accountability, oversight, and transparency, as well as institutional reform, which is informed through the PEFA assessments. After Mona, we will have a speech by an opening speech by the Deputy Minister for Finance of Republic of North Macedonia, Nicolae Jankulovski. He just joined us for this webinar, and he will bring the institutional perspective of the PEFA reform, followed by the Professor Katarina Shapkova-Kocavska, who is the Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law, Justinianus Primus in Skopje. Her work bridges economics, public finance, and institutions. In the discussion, we are joined by two of our own, Nicole Farensvoort, Program Director and Lead Researcher at our hub in Kosovo, the Kosovo Women's Network, a sociologist, researcher, and long-standing gender equality advocate whose work on gender-responsive budgeting, discrimination, violence, and EU accession processes have informed policies and legal change in Kosovo and the region. And the second of our colleagues is Alexandru Gribincea. He is the project coordinator at the Keystone Moldova, an economist who brings experience from Moldovan civil society. And he has been working also practically on gender responsive budgeting and accountability processes. As mentioned, building on Gender Budget Watchdog Network's previous regional dialogue and campaign, this webinar revisits the PEFA Gender Responsive Public Financial Management Framework with a practical focus on assessing how to move from commitments and advocacy messages to measurable budget decisions and accountability. The event responds to the PEFA-based discussions, showing important links between stronger practices of implementing the gender-responsive public finance management framework and better gender equality outcomes, while also reminding us that evidence must be used carefully and translated into concrete reforms. So without further ado, I will ask at the beginning for Mona El-Chami from the PEFA Secretariat to set the scene and to introduce us briefly to the PEFA Gender Responsive Public Finance Management Framework. What is it? How the 9 indicators are organized and what kind of questions they help us ask. Mona, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank GBWN, Maria, and the rest of the team for inviting the PEFA Secretariat to join this event and speak about PEFA Gender. I'll try to answer the questions raised by Maria, and also at the end, if there is time, I can also share with you some key findings of an assessment of completed PEFA Gender assessments that we did last year. Share with you some findings and some thoughts. So, what is PEFA Gender or PEFA GRPFM? I'd like to call it for short PEFA Gender. So the PEFA Gender is a supplementary framework for assessing gender-responsive public financial management, and it's a set of supplementary indicators that builds on the PEFA framework to collect information on the degree to which a country's public financial management system addresses the government's goals with regard to acknowledging different needs of men, women, and different subgroups of these categories, and promoting gender equality. Simply, PEFA looks at whether public financial management systems take gender into account. It does not measure gender outcomes. Instead, it focuses on systems and processes. It asks whether budget rules, information, and oversight allow gender priorities to be reflected in public finances. We have nine indicators, and let me categorize them in 4 categories. The first, they are actually organized around the budget cycle and accountability chain. First, policy and investment decisions. This looks at early decisions before the budget is approved. So indicator 1, it's
Kategoria e parë është para se buxheti të aprovohet, nëse mberen parasnish.
looks at whether governments analyze
Shikohet nëse qeveria analizon ndikimin gjinor.
expenditure and revenue policies. Gender responsive public investment management. It looks whether major public investment
Indicatoare.
projects
Deci acest indicator evaluează primul indicator.
So together,
I sve to
these
ukupno,
indicators ask,
ovi
is
indikatori
gender considered before money is allocated? Now,
uzimaju u obzir da li se prvo procenjuje
budget preparation and guidance. So we have indicator 3, gender responsive budget circular. It assesses whether the budget circular gives guidance on gender to ministries. And indicator 4, gender responsive budget proposal documentation. It looks whether budget documents include information on gender priorities and measures. So the question here is, do decision makers see gender information when they prepare and approve the budget? The third, it's budget execution and performance information. So it focuses on implementation and monitoring. Indicator 5, it's called sex disaggregated performance information for service delivery. It assesses whether performance information for public services is broken down by sex. And indicator 6, tracking budget expenditure for gender equality. It looks at whether governments can identify and track spending related to gender equality across the budget cycle. So these indicators ask, can governments follow the money and see who benefits from public spending? The fourth is about reporting, evaluation, and oversight. So we have indicator 7, gender responsive reporting. It looks at whether governments publish reports on gender-related budget execution and impacts. Indicator 8, evaluation of gender impacts of service delivery. It assesses whether the gender impacts of services are evaluated. And gender 9 is called legislative scrutiny of gender impacts of the budget. It looks whether parliaments review and scrutinize gender impacts during budget approval and oversight. So the question is gender part of reporting, evaluation, and legislative oversight? So with this, what questions does PEFA Gender help ask? It helps us ask system-level questions, such as, is gender analysis used in budget decisions? Is gender information visible in budget documents? Can gender-related spending be tracked? Do parliaments have information to hold government accountable? It tells us whether the budget system supports gender equality in practice, not just in policy statements. So if you ask, so how should PEFA gender findings be used in practice, whether by governments or civil society or other? I think let's go to one point here. PEFA gender findings should not be used to claim causality. So the framework assesses systems, not outcomes. So a PEFA gender score does not prove that budget caused general results. So how should the findings be used? First, as a reform diagnostic. So it is really a diagnostic tool. It helps governments identify specific gaps, such as, for example, weak guidance in indicator 3, or limited sex disaggregated data in indicator 5, or weak legislative oversight in indicator 9. So this helps define clear and practical reform priorities. Second, it can be used to sequence and prioritize reforms. So we all know that not everything can be fixed at once. So PEFA gender shows where the system is the weakest and where reforms need to start. It helps governments understand how different parts of the budget cycle are linked. And also it can be used as an accountability tool. So first, and we know it supports evidence-based dialogue. So parliaments and civil society can use the findings to ask focused questions, such as, why is gender analysis missing in indicator 1? Why can gender-related spending not be tracked under indicator 6? So this strengthens budget oversight and accountability. And last, as a baseline to track system change. So when repeated, it shows whether budget systems are improving. Gender is more embedded in public financial management processes. At its core, PEFA gender helps answer one simple question. Do our public financial management systems allow gender priorities to be planned, funded, implemented, and overseen? As simple as that. We have completed a review of 32 PEFA gender assessments last year. So assessments done since the launch of the PEFA gender framework until March 2025. And so 32 assessments, they include 7 reports at subnational level. So big picture, most systems are still at an early stage of integrating gender into core public financial management processes. Only a small number have embedded gender requirements into core tools, such as budget circulars or annual reporting frameworks. A key global weakness is gender impact analysis of new policies. And this is consistent with broader OECD and IMF findings that only a few countries apply advanced gender practices systematically. So, three key lessons from the assessments. First, progress is happening, but it's happening from the middle. So operational tools like budget circulars and performance data advance faster than upstream policy analysis. Second, central guidance matters. So when ministers of finance embed gender requirements in core processes such as gender public financial management elements, improve as well. So another one is data is outpacing decision making. So sex disaggregated data is increasingly available, but not yet consistently used to shape policy or resource allocation. So out of this assessment, three priority areas stand out. First, strengthening upstream gender analysis. Second, enhancing legislative engagement, which was, the weakest. Embedding gender responsive budgeting into mainstream public financial management reforms. And by the way, there is a blog that has more information about, the progress done and the challenges that it will be published, I think early March. It was done with Maya Bosnick. So I'll also share a link to that blog with the network. So, I think this is good enough for the time given. And I really thank you for your interest in PEFA and PEFA gender, and to consistently promote the tool, and for inviting me to these interesting events. So looking forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the practical task is to use PEFA as a reform of the public finance management system and accountability tool, not as a proof tool for policy implementation, as far as I understood, especially gender policy implementation. This is what we are getting also in the discussion in the chat room, where we have one of the best experts in gender mainstreaming of policy, Shayla Quinn, that we worked with, making this comment. I will invite Shayla also to intervene, but after the intervention of the Deputy Minister of Finance of Macedonia, Nikolcha Jankulovski. Mr. Jankulovski, you are welcome to make an opening, very short opening remark.
Thank you, Maria. Do you listening to me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, dear Maria, dear the best and dedicated team from the Center for Research and Policy Making. Thank you for your invitation. It's my pleasure to be a part of this webinar today. Dear distinguished representatives of institutions, civil society, and international partners, it is an honor to join this webinar on the PEFA gender framework as a Deputy Minister of Finance, North Macedonia, and I would like to acknowledge the Ministry for its leading role in promoting gender responsive budgeting. The Ministry contributes by integrating gender considerations into budget planning and preparation, in collecting and analyzing sex disaggregated data to inform policy decisions, ensuring transparency of budget allocations, and supporting monitoring, reporting, and accountability mechanisms across government institutions, and of course with the help of NGOs in the country. Public budgets are among the most powerful policy tools governments have. They fund, as we know, education, healthcare, infrastructure, social protection, and economic development. Without considering the different needs of women and men, we risk unintentionally reinforcing existing inequalities. This is where the PEFA gender framework plays a key role. It helps governments evaluate whether gender considerations are integrated throughout the entire budget cycle, from planning, as Mona said, from budget circulars and preparation to execution, reporting, and oversight. The framework assesses gender responsive policies, the use of sex designated data, transparency of allocations, institutional capacity, and accountability mechanisms. In our region here, Kosovo and Moldova are already applying PEFA gender assessments, showing the value of linking public finance reforms to measurable gender equality objectives, while North Macedonia has conducted PEFA assessments for its public financial management system. Adopting the gender responsive extension would strengthen our capacity to ensure inclusive and accountable budgeting. PEFA gender is not a guarantee of immediate improvements in gender equality, but it is a powerful tool for reform, accountability, and better decision making. When applied effectively, it helps make budgets more efficient, responsible, and inclusive, delivering better outcomes for all citizens. I hope we will have a productive and insightful webinar. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I'm very thrilled to hear that our advocacy to have the supplementary framework on gender PEFA being applied in Macedonia as well in the coming period. I'm looking forward to the results, and we as civil society are your partners. We will try to promote it and hold the government accountable based on the findings of this framework, of course. To give us a further legal and institutional perspective of how this can be operationalized, we have invited our colleague from the Faculty of Law, Professor Shapkova-Koцevska. I will ask her this specific question. How do you see the core elements of PEFA being applied to the Macedonian and the public finance management systems of the region? Where do you often see the implementation gap?
Thank you very much, Maria. It is a pleasure being here today. I'm quite new to the field in the gender responsive budgeting, but since my previous few tasks, this is something that I find very thrilling and very important to be discussed about. So I was very happy when I received the invitation to participate here today. As a traditional professor from the public universities in the country, I have prepared myself a brief presentation. If you don't mind, I would like to share it with the audience. Just a moment, yes. My task today was. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so my task today was to give a very brief introspection about the legal and institutional preconditions that are necessary for effective gender responsive public finance management. When I started to prepare myself for the presentation, I always ask myself, why why are we doing all of this effort? So actually, the most important question that very often we forgot to implement it in the public discussions is why are we actually putting so much effort into some initiative? And here is what I found that's very important, and that is because I work in the economics department, and I very often analyze different scenarios from economics perspective. What is very striking is that budgeting, how the public funds are allocated and managed, can very often have a different impact on men and women, which might actually cause different economic and financial and fiscal outcomes. Not only economic outcomes, but also distributional effects. So if we do not take into consideration the gender perspective in the budgeting process, it might even deepen the existing inequalities between men and women within the countries. There are many reasons why economic theory describes this, such as that women and men very often have different roles in the society. Very often women are employed in low-paid sectors compared to men. The unpaid work within the households, such as the taking care of the children or the elderly persons, very often falls on the women. And in different countries worldwide, the access to public services, such as especially healthcare, education, is unequal. So they have different access to these services, which might contribute to different outcome with regards to access to public funds. So because of all of these reasons, it's important to have a gender responsive framework when it comes to public finance management. And today, very briefly, I would like just to discuss about the general provisions with regard to legal preconditions and institutional preconditions. The discussion today is going to be on a very broad level, so I would not go into details for the countries within the regions because the period for preparing myself for this presentation was very short. But I would like to raise some issues with regard to what should be considered as a general rule when it comes to setting the legal framework and setting the institutional framework. The idea that motivated me is that this framework is going to be used in order to advance gender equality. So the idea of the gender responsive PFM is to advance gender equality, but we must take into consideration how this goal is going to be achieved, because there is not one straightforward solution how different countries are going to react to this design. So when it comes to how the actual design is going to take place, we must take into consideration the specifics of the different countries, such as the institutional framework with regard to finance management, the legal framework. Different countries are organized differently when it comes to the legal systems. The level of decentralization, are there going to be regions? Are there going to be municipalities? What is going to be the role of each of these institutions? The readiness to collect and compile data, and of course the institutional capacity. So each of these different aspects will have different impact on how GRPFM is going to be implemented within the country. But what is common for all of this is that we use this as a tool in order to advance the gender equality. With regard to the legal preconditions for the framework, the broad areas that should be taken into consideration from my perspective is that there must be a binding equality framework for enforceable duties. So not only a strategy, but actually a framework that is going to clarify the enforceable duties of the system. The budget systems must have provisions that will make the GRPFM tools to be mandatory. So not something that we wish, but something that we are obliged to do. There must be a legal basis for transparency, participation, and access to budget information and any other relevant public information. And the rules, there must be rules how the data are collected. and how they are classified. So rules enabling gender relevant data and classification. And there must be a mandate for independent oversight in order to examine the gender dimensions. When it comes to binding equality framework with enforceable duties, well, how I understand this is that actually the rules of the countries, how the constituents of the country think about this issue. So usually it's the constitution. In many countries, it's the constitution, but it's not the only legal act. There might be other primary laws that actually actually state for gender equality and non-discrimination provisions. Also, what is very favorable is to have gender equality law that establish state duties. So we're not speaking about what are our wishes, but actually what are going to be the duties that are going to be taken into consideration. And there must be a clear mandate for the national gender equality machinery. The idea of this slide is actually to present that this is not an optional policy. So this is something that we must know who is responsible for which part of the public finance management with regard to gender responsibilities, and who is going to be responsible for the actions that are going to be taken to act. With regard to the budget system, there must be mandatory provisions that allow usage of the GRPFM tools. As the Deputy Minister has stated in his speech, so usually it's the budget circular. So it should include instructions to line ministries how to report with regard to this framework. Also, the program or the performance budgeting elements can carry gender objectives, outputs, and indicators. Budget documentation obligations such as gender statements or annexes, in addition to the circular process. And with regard to the reporting requirements, also midterm or at the end reporting that include gender tagging or gender markers is something also that should be taken into consideration. Also, because this framework is not only about giving the numbers how many beneficiaries are going to be men and women, so it's not only a calculation exercise. We need to have a very strict budget transparency rules in order how the data are going to be published in a timely manner, so the public can be informed about how the budget is executed and how the public funds are allocated. There must be a supplementary framework, supportive framework, which allows free access to information so the public can obtain the relevant data. And other instrument is the public consultation requirements when the fiscal or the budget documents are preparing.
Thank you. I think that we had a very good introduction on the institutional and the legal preconditions which are needed for this to be operationalized, especially because we, as civil society, are very much interested into this transparency and accountability. You said that the PEFA was set up in order to advance gender equality. In the discussion chat box, we already have some opposing claims to that. Sheila Quinn and Claudie Vuche are saying that this is very declarative and we need to it shows for gender advocates that this framework is just doing a lip service to the budget. It's not really an effective tool to be used for system change in terms of advancing gender equality policy. Maybe we can hear from them a bit of a discussion, and we'll come back to also civil society perspectives and how we can use this into improving the legal and institutional framework for operationalizing PEFA gender. Sheila, maybe I'll give you room for making your comments, and yes, Claudie also, if you want to join the discussion. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to stay off camera because I'm not feeling 100% and I probably look horrible.
The picture is
I remember
excellent.
when I wrote the manual for the Council of Europe decades ago, I wanted to say that gender budgeting was a radical project. Well, they wouldn't allow me to use the word radical because it was too radical. So they allowed me to use the word ambitious. And I say that now because what I'm going to say now will seem very radical. And to those of my colleagues, quote unquote, in the gender budgeting field, they would probably consider it blasphemous. And I will preface this comment by another little story. When I was once in Kyrgyzstan and was working with a Russian expert, Lyudmila, whose last name I can't pronounce, who was a wonderful Trojan of a socialist feminist, but whose understanding of gender budgeting was very different from mine. She was Russian, and since the fall of the Soviet Union, she wanted to ensure that the budget had a large social aspect, that the social aspect of the budget was large. Now, this is different from my perspective, which was it's all about gender mainstreaming. Gender is everywhere. We've got to attack the whole system. And I pondered this for a while, and then I thought she's quite right. And it's more relevant now in that we've had 20 plus years of gender responsive budgeting, and we seem to have moved maybe 10 millimeters on a 500-mile journey. And because she knew that the real need was to get women out of poverty, to get them the social care that they needed. And so the focus was on that aspect. And that was as much gender budgeting as us trying to introduce these gender mainstreaming rules. So I actually think that PEFA was a distraction when it was first introduced as a potential gender budgeting tool. I thought it was a distraction then. I think it's even more of a distraction now. It's allowed us to continue this kind of rhetoric that we've been using for at least 25 years. We haven't changed it. When I say we, I say those of us who advocate and are the practitioners of this and who give the training and write the manuals. We have not changed our language. And yet we know it's not working. We have governments all over the world saying that 45% or 65% of their budget is gender responsive when it's not. It may be gender relevant, but if they don't recognize the difference between relevance and responsive, then that figure means nothing. If they were to say 65% of our budget we recognize as being gender relevant, and we're going to do something about it by making it gender responsive, that would be something. So as I said, what I have to say is radical. And I think that there is a knownness. Two things I'd like to see. I'd like to see us practitioners getting together for a real honest dialogue about this. I'd also like to see more women's groups getting more money to advocate for what they need. And not just in terms of the services that they need to apply, but for the policy work, because policy comes from politics and people are politics and advocacy is politics. And that's where any real change will be made, when the budget reflects some of the real needs and priorities that align with redressing gender inequality and promoting gender equality.
Thank you, Sheila. This means a lot, your engagement and discussion. I think that I saw Nicole smiling and nodding, and I will invite her now to contribute to this discussion, because as a long-term civil society activist and great expert in the gender mainstreaming in policies and budgets, she already has used PEFA framework for assessing also international development funding and national development funding. She has the insight on how useful this is, and whether to confirm it as an instrument to advance gender equality or as an instrument to check whether gender equality is being integrated into the different phases of the budgeting process. Thank you, Claudia, for subscribing 100% to Sheila's comments. Nicole, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon or morning to everybody. Sheila, so nice to see you or hear you after a long time. I also 100% subscribe to what Sheila has said, and agree, as we feminists have been saying, we need to be focusing on the impacts of these policies, not just saying, hey, we have the policy in place. Our budget circular mentions gender budgeting, tick the box, therefore we're done. This is the challenge that we see, is we're really with these systems, whether it's the PEFA gender or is the SDG 5C1 monitoring framework that's been put forth by UN Women. Both of these kind of are a box ticking exercise, and they don't really measure the impacts. They don't show us how the money, if it has been allocated at all and can be tracked at all, is actually impacting gender equality. And that is a huge shortfall with both of these different monitoring frameworks. So I was asked to speak today actually about civil society's role and how we use PEFA. And all I can say in my defense, Sheila, is that we have used it as part of our transnational advocacy. We in the Western Balkans, as many of you know, and as many of us feel, are amid the EU accession process. And what can potentially influence our governments, not always, but sometimes in the past, and maybe not as much today, has been the argument that EU accession will move us forward. And as part of the EU accession process, the European Commission has subscribed to PEFA and PEFA Gender. They have it in the Gender Action Plan 3 that they are supporting, or as a target to support governments to do gender budgeting. And we have tried to grab onto this as a way to use it in existing policy circles to push forward gender budgeting. Yes, it's not as radical an approach. We have been nicknamed by radical feminists as institutionalized feminists because we're working within institutions. But while remaining radical in our dreams, we believe that we have to work with the institutions to push for change. And by tying this to the EU accession process, we are attempting to push our governments to implement changes. Now, if they fulfill all of PEFA and get straight A's on their scorecard, does that mean they've done gender budgeting? No, definitely not. But it can be a sign that they've started getting it into the policy process. And we believe if it's actually institutionalized within the policy process, it will increase the likeliness of them actually making progress on gender equality. So if gender budgeting isn't mentioned at all, they don't do anything in PEFA, then of course they won't make progress. But if they do have a budget circular that mentions gender, if the parliament does start to have hearings and discuss it, if they do start finally making sex disaggregated data available online for us so that we also can analyze it, all of these things will help us when they become laws or policies to push for gender budgeting to be implemented in terms of accountability. So this is how we as civil society have been trying to use it together with the EU accession process and what some theorists call transnational boomerang advocacy, reaching out to push back against our governments to make changes happen. And in this context, I think civil society has a very crucial role. And I echo your point that civil society needs financing to keep up this accountability role, not only for accountability, but for inclusive democracy, for good governance, for rule of law, quite frankly. And in this sense, civil society plays a crucial role in monitoring what the government is actually doing. When the PEFA assessments are done and the experts come to look at what's happening, it's vital that they talk to civil society, just like they do with Gravio processes related to the Istanbul Convention, because we're the ones on the ground who actually see how things are happening. The government may say, oh, yes, we have sex desegregated data, but we can say, oh, no, it's not available. Here, I can show you. So I think having civil society there to actually act as a check on the government and to show what is lacking is very important in pushing forward progress. We also monitor in between. The last Kosovo PEFA gender report was in 2022. The last one was supposed to be last year, but it hasn't come out yet. So in the meantime, we're following every year what is happening and trying to push forward for the institutionalization of gender budgeting. And this, we do use the PEFA and SDG because at a policy level, they gain a bit more weight than us just saying, please change the system. They gain weight because the European Commission, because the UN have endorsed them, and that puts a pressure on our government to try to install better policies linked to gender budgeting. We also provide expertise to the government in some cases on how they can better institutionalize gender budgeting, how they can better track data, how they can integrate this into laws and policies. And so I think in this sense, civil society has a very important role that sometimes the governments don't recognize at all. Some governments do more than others in the Western Balkans. But I think also the actors that are pushing for PEFA, such as the European Union, the World Bank, and other actors, also should be emphasizing to governments the important role that civil society can play, not just as watchdogs in holding the government accountable, but also in providing expertise. And I would just come to a last point here. Women's rights groups have always been at the forefront and pushing forward for gender equality, for gender budgeting, for other aspects. And we all know that there is a global crisis right now. Gender budgeting is not working. In fact, the opposite. I don't know if we move 10 millimeters forward, if now we've moved 10 feet backwards. But we're seeing these global cuts in financing from all the traditional donors. Maybe they're against gender equality. Maybe they just decided they want to put more funding into military. But in this current context, it's even more needed that we raise our voices and advocate together, including especially for financing for women's rights groups. Until now, we've been providing expertise to our governments basically for free. For these experts that come, that interview us, I think I'd probably give 10 interviews a week for free. That's a lot of time. Well, we don't have that time available anymore because we don't have people anymore because we've had to lay people off. And this is very extractive. And I think that there also needs to be more recognition about these international missions that are coming. Yes, we want to help. We've always wanted to help. But we need to acknowledge the time and the expertise of women's rights groups and compensate them for that. And I think here there is a need for international actors to really start considering women's rights groups as experts and paying them for their expertise. Otherwise, there won't be people to hold governments accountable very much anymore. So this would be some points that I would like to emphasize, and I look forward to further discussion.
Thank you, Nicole. It's very important that actually, as you're saying and kind of confirming what the discussion so far has been, is that PEFA is a framework which helps us institutionalize gender-responsive budgeting and follow up whether it is integrated in all of the phases of the budgeting process. It doesn't really show us whether gender analysis is informing these policies and policy interventions. And I think in this respect also Mona and Sheila and you agreed. Alexandru comes from Moldova, where again we have a country which is implementing, has used gender supplementary framework of the PEFA assessment framework, and civil society has used it for advocating gender responsive policies. Maybe you can give us also a perspective whether it is useful for that, or we are again proving that we have a framework which can follow up on the integration of gender responsive budgeting in the budgeting process, but not really advancing gender equality, because gender analysis is not informing the policies that are budgeted and included into the public finance framework. Alexandru, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria, for a warm presentation. So hope you can see my presentation here on its share.
Yes,
so
it's on.
I want to present our perspective from Keystone Moldova as a part of GBVN, what we have done. We did a advocacy campaign last October. I'll show at the end our results, what was the impact. And I also want to tell you that PEFA is not just a technical government tool, it's a ready-made accountable framework that civil society can use. So it's ready, you just use and speak about it. And this is the results from the PEFA, the last PEFA that was done in 2022. So you can see the score was very low, the lowest maybe. 5 indicators scored D, it's like minimal, and 4 indicators scored C. The critical gaps was that there is no ex-ante gender analysis, there is no gender budget documents, Parliament is not engaged, budget circular excluded gender, no spending tracking system, and only 25 of programs have gender markers. And the progress from 2022, we have a very good milestones, I think. From 23, the new public finance management strategy included gender budgeting as a front priority, and 24, the budget circular required 2 ministers to integrate gender objective as Minister of Labor and Social Protection and Minister of Agriculture, and 25, some subcategories include gender indicators, and as subsidies agriculture and employment. And 2026, we start also 3 more minister pilots as Minister of Energy and Minister of Infrastructure and Minister of Economy. And why PEFA matters for NGOs? PEFA strengthens NGO advocacy in 5 ways. First is provides internationally recognized evidence. Second, it shows exactly where transparency and accountability are weak. Third, it allows NGOs to speak the same technical language as government and donors. Fourth, it connects budget to real social needs. The fifth is to strengthen donors reporting because donors value PEFA alignment. Advocacy opportunities, there are 4 main entry points. 1, advocate for legal reform to require gender impact analysis. 2, engage the annual budget circular process. This way to planning rules are set. 3, work with Parliament to introduce gender review in the budget debates. 4, monitor Court of Accountants audits and push the follow action again. And the next slide is monitoring spending using PEFA. The simple monitoring cycle is to read the PEFA report. Of course, it's a large document. Step 2 is track budget progress and check if gender key program indicators improve over time. 3, request spending data if needed. 4 is publish shadow reports, and 5th is to engage in informed consultation. And transparency and resource, most key documents are already public: budget law, execution budget, performance reports, audit reports, and budget circular. And now I want to show you our advocacy campaign that we did last October, and this is our result. We translated PEFA findings into actions. We submitted a formal position letter to Minister of Finance, signed by 55 organizations. We cited specific PEFA indicators and proposed the reforms. We also ran a social media campaign telling the findings with simple language, so people can speak about it and comment, of course. The campaign reached about 150,000 views with mostly positive feedback. There was still some negative. We show something important. Technical evidence can be communicated publicly and the people respond. And this was our recommendation for the government to introduce gender spending markers, require gender budget statement, extend GRV at all ministries, institutionalize NGOs consultations, standardize gender indicators. And for NGOs, to download and to read the PEFA that is in your country, identify 2-3 indicators most relevant for you, produce annual shadow report tracking genders, and for civil society also PEFA monitoring coalition. That is it from my side. Thank you. Sorry, Mary, I can't hear you.
Excuse me. I just confirmed that it's very important that civil society know how to use the PEFA framework into their advocacy and connect or utilize the entry points in legal and institutional framework Katarina was talking about in order to further integration of gender in the public finance management. I would ask now the audience to ask questions or make comments. Maybe Claudie would like to join the discussion or anyone else. I have problems with my computer. I don't see the whole pane. Sorry. Thank you, Shayla, for joining us. I saw that you wrote that you have to leave. Any questions from the audience? Claudie, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Marija. I don't mind saying something. Well, thank you very much. I mean, what I heard from Nicole in particular and Sheila, I think it just it boosts it depresses me, but it boosts my morale as well. You know, it's kind of a combination. I'm speaking from France, so with a particular perspective, we've had a government over the last 15 years now that has placed gender equality as a great national cause. But of course, you know, we're still running after the budget, you know, really trying to see what it means in reality. And I totally agree with both Sheila and Nicole. I think we need to really come up as a very, you know, with a very feminist and very defined agenda and saying, you know, the money, you know, really identifying, you know, what are the gaps that and the inequalities that we want to have money put on, you know, where is the money and what money is put on gender responsive, you know, on gender-based violence, what money is placed on care issues, what money is put towards. I think we need to really identify very concrete objects and go after governments. And I think it goes for local authorities as well. I mean, we're in the middle of municipal elections now in France, well, in 2 weeks' time. And we are running after all the candidates to say, you know, these are the issues that we want you to think about and tackle and budget for. What are you going to be doing? And whether it's money that is dedicated or whether it's money that is, you know, mainstream within other budgets, where and how much and to do what? I think we need to just, you know, the whole institutional language. I mean, I totally agree with Sheila. I think, you know, it's not helping us anymore. And I'm all in favor of mainstreaming, and I've worked on mainstreaming all these years, and I will continue working on mainstreaming. But, I mean, accountability has to become real, and it is not real at the moment, not at all. You know, and I put in the chat, you know, when AWID has been asking now for like over 10 years, where is the money for women's rights? Finished. Simple.
It's not on the agenda anymore.
No, but I mean, simple, you know, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, we know all things are being cut, and that's the amazing thing. I mean, we are still doing gender responsive budgeting in countries that are showing in all sorts of ways they're cutting down, you know, gender courses at university. They're cutting down on so many different, but we're still doing gender budgeting as if nothing. I also think that we are doing such an incredible facade of gender responsive budgeting in countries that have really showed clearly over the years that they're not interested in gender equality and not even democratic in terms of women's rights. But still, we're giving them a facade of respectability when it comes to gender because we're doing gender budgeting with them. It's driving me nuts a bit. And I think I will be ranting radically if you give me a few more minutes. But that's my perspective right now. And I think also to respond to the person who just talked right now, I think civil society need to better understand, PEFA and everything. But there are much simpler way of explaining to normal citizens, what is gender budgeting and how do you go after your municipality? How do you go after your local authority? How do you go after your government for gender rights and money for budgets and budgets for women's rights? PEFA is one thing, but I think we have to break it down in a way that really makes, almost like doing popular education on gender budgeting. I think we need to do that in a big, big way, pedagogy on gender budgeting. PEFA is not helping us. It's too, most people don't know what it actually means. And we can explain it, but I think we can find different ways of making it real and concrete at, a very manageable level.
Thank you, Claudie. Anyone else from the audience wanting to ask a question maybe or make a comment?
Yes, can I? I can't raise the hand. I don't know what's happening. Hi, thank you for having us today. I totally agree with Claude. Yes, PEFA is very important, but it's been, analyzed and looked and read by people who are working with it. But if you want to go to general public, to general citizens on, for example, rural areas, the most important thing is to bring the information to them and what do they need, as Claude said. We are doing this in Tirana, for example, with GADC from years now, related to the citizens' priorities and advocating then to local level on the municipalities and then on central one for gender budgeting. Because it was mentioned and Nicole laughed before, and for sure, because they are saying all the programs have all gender budgeting integrated on it. In Albania, we had 42, Besiana is here, she may correct me, in 42 programs of the government of 2024, 2025, was mentioned that it was gendered budget, but then when you go on the list and try to find what did this offer to the citizens, to women, to Roma community, to LGBTIQ plus community, to survivors of domestic violence, etc., you have a lot to discuss and a lot to advocate on both local and central levels. So thank you so much for having us today. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Esmeralda, for the comment. And we have one question from Gerta Mehmeti in the chat box. She says, in general, in projects is required a minimum of 10% of budget dedicated to gender aspects. Do you think is needed advocacy with donors to increase this percentage? I don't know how we link it with PEFA, but it's a question that civil society can actually mobilize around and do a joint advocacy. Does anyone want to reflect on this? If not, I will conclude that today's discussion reaffirmed that PEFA Gender Responsive Public Finance Management Framework should not be used as proof that gender equality policy has been advanced or achieved, nor as a causal claim to results. It is a diagnostic tool that helps governments and civil society identify if the systems function and integrate gender into the budgeting cycle. PEFA assessment is just a start and a stepping stone, but it shouldn't divert the attention from the real gender responsive budgeting objective, which is to actually provide a system change by funding policies which are addressing needs of women and men fully, and these needs are different, so different budgeting and should be provided for their to respond to them. Without clear legal mandates, Katerina Shapkova-Kucevska said, and defined responsibilities and institutional procedures, PEFA cannot be achieved. And we know that this is also very much important for full implementation of gender responsive budgeting commitments in the Western Balkan region and Moldova. Especially installing or institutionalizing procedures for gender analysis of policies and budgets are needed. In this respect, we can say that systems matter also for the implementation of gender responsive public finance framework as a supplementary framework to the PEFA. But these practices must correlate with gender equality outcomes because just by applying PEFA, even the supplementary framework of PEFA, we cannot automatically produce gender equality outcomes. Civil society is very important and has a strategic role as a reform partner. We saw that from the comments and interventions of Nicole and Alexandru. The experiences in Kosovo and Moldova show that the PEFA reports can strengthen advocacy, can be helpful in prioritizing gender in the reform and be used as an entry point for further advocacy, public dialogue on gender equality outcomes, and can support monitoring at national and subnational level. Considering that the Gender Budget Watchdog Network is working regionally, and considering that PEFA is a global framework used, it has been our experience that it can be used transnationally, as Nicole said, and that is a value added of this tool for also peer learning and pressure for consistency. And I invite everyone that are not yet members of the Gender Budget Watchdog Network to become one in order to contribute to this comparative learning, collective advocacy that is reinforcing accountability for gender equality across the borders. Thank you very much for participating on the webinar, and we see you at the next Gender Budget Watchdog Network talks.